leap year in this 2024 on this February 27th. Welcome to another edition of ATL Prime Sports. I'm Jurjevich. Joining me this evening is the one, the only TC Todd Corder in Woodstock, and our fabulous producer, Wayne Ridenauer, in beautiful Memphis, Tennessee. You can catch us all at ATL Prime Sports on Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, Apple, and of course Spotify. You can find us personally on X at JJ Get You One for myself, at RWY Junior for Wayne, at Corder Todd for TC Todd Corder, and at LG for Real Though for Larry Gardner, who is out doing the coaching thing up there in Adairsville. How's everyone doing? Wayne, we'll start with you, man.
Well, you know, two events last week, start of the NASCAR season, which I follow pretty well, and my wife and I had our 27th anniversary, and we were talking about it earlier, and she says it feels like it's only been about 5 years, so I think we can carry this thing into a pretty good distance.
Awesome. Well, happy anniversary to you and Kim, your wife, and what a photo finish here in Atlanta. Atlanta Motor Speedway last week, where first and third were separated by what, 7,000th of a second?
It was crazy.
Absolutely insane. I'm doing well, but not as well as the soon-to-be running back free agent market. Guys like Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, all expected to become free agents. NFL teams in need of another running back will be calling them ASAP. Todd, how you doing this evening?
Fantastic. Got a doubleheader tomorrow at the Lock in Clayton State, 5:30 for the ladies. They always go first. And the men's game approximately at 7:30 or 25 minutes after the ladies' game is over. Clayton State, the women in the middle of the pack in the Peach Belt Conference standings. They'll be playing number 23 ranked Georgia Southwestern. The Hurricanes come in their first place in the PBC in the women's, and in the men's, Clayton State the men's will finish out the schedule. They'll have the two games here, obviously tomorrow against Georgia Southwestern. They did not qualify for the Peach Belt Conference tournament, and the season final will be on Senior Day, as highly ranked North Georgia will come into the Lock. We'll have each of those games myself, along with Sylvester Williams, on the Peach Belt Conference Sports Network. One other thing really quickly, gentlemen, how ironic that the Winnipeg Jets are having attendance problems. Those of you that follow the NHL know that is the club that the Atlanta club left to go to Winnipeg. They renamed them the Jets. Winnipeg used to have the Jets years ago, and now they're having attendance issues. The team needs to get back to a season ticket base of 13,000, and current attendance numbers are not going to work over the long haul. That was reported 39 minutes ago. We'll see how it works out. As you know, the NHL, even though they say they're not looking to expand, they are. They can go from 32 to 36 teams. They'll probably have a $1 million expansion fee. That's why they want to expand. Show me the money, follow the money, and you'll get your answer.
What's on tap for today? Georgia State voice Dave Cohen joins us to talk about the new hire, Dell McGee, for the football staff. Talking what the Falcons and other teams will do at quarterback this fall, and our dark horse Braves player or other players, in your case, Wayne, we'll talk about the Rangers for a second, dark horse candidates to make the opening day roster. And joining us on ATL Prime Sports this evening, friend of the show and voice of the Georgia State Panthers, Dave Cohen. Dave, it's good to have you back on. How are you, and your thoughts on the Dell McGee hire?
Well, great to be back on with you guys. You know, not a lot going on around Georgia State. Wink, wink. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind here the last, say, week and a half. I was actually in Virginia with men's basketball. We were on the James Madison Old Dominion trip, and I had been at the first football spring practice, I guess not last Tuesday, but 2 Tuesdays ago. And then we left on Wednesday for Virginia for the 2-game basketball trip. And I wake up on, Wednesday morning or Thursday morning. And of course, Twitter is just hammering away on the news that's breaking that Sean Elliott has decided to leave Georgia State and head back to Columbia, South Carolina, and that he had accepted a job as the tight ends coach and I think run game coordinator on Shane Beamer's staff at South Carolina. So you know how social media is. It spreads like wildfire, and so kind of got caught up in trying to keep up with that news from afar as we're focusing in on Jonas Hayes and basketball. But, you know, I had folks, you know, obviously burning up my phone and texting me about, you know, did I know and what did I think and what's going on? And, you know, the first thing I said was I was not surprised at all that Coach Elliott left. He was here for 7 seasons. Basically, he was the head coach for half of the life of the program because it's 14 years old. This coming season will be season number 15. You look at the trajectory of the program. Bill Curry was the face of Georgia State football for 2 years prior to ramping up, and then he was the face of the program as the first head coach for seasons 1, 2, and 3. He handed the baton off to Trent Miles, who had come from a successful Indiana State program. And in hindsight, people that only look from the outside in don't know that Coach Miles, in my opinion, did a pretty good job basically sacrificing his win-loss career record to usher Georgia State from an FCS independent and then an FCS CAA, Colonial Athletic Association team for 1 year. And Coach Miles will forever be remembered as taking Georgia State to their first bowl game in 2015, following a fantastic win in Statesboro to get to that 6th win on the last game of the season. That's one of the great moments of Georgia State football history, no matter what anybody says. We beat Georgia Southern in Statesboro 34-7 at 5-6 to get that 6th win on the last game of the season to become bowl eligible. And so fast forward, you know, a 3-9 season ultimately causes Georgia State to move on from Coach Miles. Sean Elliott is hired from South Carolina, and I'll talk about his body of work here in a minute, but the reason why I was not surprised after 7 years, and this has become common knowledge, you know, his family never moved from Columbia to Atlanta. He had a place in Atlanta. His family remained, his wife and 2 children, who are now, I believe, high school kids, remained in Columbia, South Carolina. That was their base of operations. And that being said, some people would make comments about it. And me personally, it never bothered me one iota. Not that, you know, Coach Elliott would care what I thought, but my point is that as long as he's in Atlanta and as long as he's helping to build the Georgia State football program and usher it to whatever that next point is, then that's all that really matters. Would we have had more wins if his family lived in the Atlanta area? I don't know, probably not. That really doesn't figure into the equation. He came to Georgia State, and I think in hindsight did a fantastic job, again, ushering Georgia State from where it was to where it is today over the last 7 years. Of course, there are games that we should have won, and then there are games that nobody thought we would win, like Tennessee in 2019 in Knoxville at Neyland Stadium. Again, one of the great moments in Georgia State football history. I told people, when Coach Elliott leaves Georgia State, he'll leave because he's ready to leave. And I believe that after the bowl win in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, to finish at 7-6 this year, and coupled with the fact that a position opened up on Shane Beamer's staff at South Carolina just a couple of days before the announcement was made, this was an opportunistic opportunity for Coach Elliott to go back home to South Carolina, to live with his family, and to coach football at a place that he loves. So more power to him. He did great things at Georgia State for the most part when we look back at the body of work. Fast forward, we held the press conference Monday morning, 10 o'clock, Center Park Stadium. The search came to a conclusion, and Del McGee, who'd been on Kirby Smart's staff as the running backs coach and run game coordinator at the University of Georgia, hired as the 4th head coach in Georgia State football history. How is this different? If there was criticism from a recruiting standpoint during the 7 years of Coach Elliott's tenure at Georgia State. It's that there was not enough focus on Atlanta, the Atlanta area, the surrounding counties, the state of Georgia when it came to recruiting. You know this, I know this, everyone knows Georgia, Florida, Texas, California, those are your top 4 states. Some might tell you that Georgia and maybe Texas are the 2 best states recruiting-wise. Texas, obviously, because of its size. But you can't argue with some of the players that Coach Elliott brought into the program. Fast forward to Del McGee, and if you listen to the press conference on ESPN Plus, if you watched it, if you weren't there, we reran it on our radio network. Obviously, he's going to hit the ground running. He was a very successful high school coach in Columbus. He's from Columbus, Georgia. Played at Auburn. Was the interim coach at Georgia Southern the year Willie Fritz left Southern to go to take the Tulane job. Coached Georgia Southern to the GoDaddy Bowl victory that they picked up in that bowl game. And then he wound up in Athens. So let's put 1 and 1 together. Is there a high school coach in the state of Georgia, from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state, to the eastern part of the state to the western part of the state, that doesn't know who every assistant coach under Kirby Smart is in that UGA staff? The answer is no. Everybody knows who every assistant coach is. That's a huge benefit for Georgia State. Now Georgia State will become a Georgia-centric recruiting operation. That's not to say you won't get kids out of the transfer portal, not to say you won't get somebody from Florida, somebody from Alabama, maybe somebody, again, from South Carolina. But I fully expect to see a lot more Georgia and Atlanta area kids on that roster. And so this is going to be very interesting to see how it transpires. I think that certainly the program is set up for success. We've talked in the past about the Sun Belt Eastern Division, very, very tough. James Madison, Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, Old Dominion, so on and so forth. Then you got the Sun Belt West. Georgia State has not yet really made a run at the Sun Belt East to even think about playing for Sun Belt Championship. So we'll see what transpires here. Not necessarily this first year, but 2 years out, 3 years out, when he gets a couple of recruiting classes and recruiting cycles into the program. Very, very exciting time as I wrap up this opening answer to be at Georgia State and be a Georgia State football fan, to say the least.
Extremely exciting times. I think it's to knock out the home run park hire. You mentioned the recruiting ties. He's won a couple of national championships as an assistant, run game director, and pound for pound, I do think Georgia's the best state for high school football in the nation in terms of the population versus Texas, Florida, and California, and the amount of players that come out of here and end up playing on Sundays. So absolute knockout the park hire. Let's talk about the rumors that are out there. Offensive, defensive coordinator, what you can and cannot comment on the reports that we've seen on 247 and the rumors out there on does he retain OC and DC, or does he bring in his own guys, Dave?
Well, again, as an employee of Georgia State Athletics, I'm always careful what I report on, just like I'm careful what I put out on social media. I don't really retweet rumors and reports. I tend to retweet what we put out with regards to Georgia State Athletics. For me, that's the smart thing to do. But you're bringing in a guy from the University of Georgia. I'm sure there's a lot of interest, especially in this region, the Southeast, not just in Georgia State, but coming to Atlanta, being a coach in the Sun Belt Conference. Anybody that's on Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media channel you're on, I'm sure if you get on there, you're going to see some names that are being bandied about as potential offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator positions, and so forth and so on down the line. I don't think he'll have a problem, one iota, of putting a staff together, whether it's somebody from the outside coming in as a new coach, or whether after meeting with all the members of the staff, he decides that he wants to retain X number of coaches that were on Coach Elliott's staff. So I'm kind of in a wait and see pattern here. I don't expect it to take weeks. I mean, It's college football. Things are moving at lightning speed across the sport in many areas. And I'm sure that once the announcement really started to leak, that Coach McGee was going to take the position at Georgia State, he probably heard from a lot of people, phone call, text messages, so on and so forth, emails from folks in that coaching, in his coaching circles that might be interested in being a part of what he's going to build at Georgia State. So again, kind of a wait and see, but I think that I think maybe some of the names that you're seeing on social media could end up coming to fruition, but I haven't seen anything that's definitive as of yet.
Dave, the timing of Sean Elliott was, to me, very peculiar. He left in the middle of spring practice. Like you said, he took the tight end's job at South Carolina. His family was at South Carolina. We've had a lot of things go on in college football that have been really strange lately. Coaches leaving head coaching positions at UCLA. Chip Kelly to go to Ohio State and be the offensive coordinator. This is some really unusual times in college football, and some of this stuff has to change. To me, it leaves the game. I wouldn't say a bad eye, but it seems like everybody's out for themselves, coaches, players, and et cetera. Your comments?
Well, I agree with what you're saying, and certainly across the sport of college football, it doesn't look like what it looked like a year ago. It doesn't look like what it looked like 2 years ago. And sitting here tonight on ATL Prime Sports podcast, I don't think any of the four of us know what it's going to look like a year from now or 2 years from now, as fast as it's moving. I will say this. I did watch Coach Elliott's first press conference from over at Columbia, South Carolina. And one of the questions that he fielded was in regards to, did he leave Georgia State because he got tired of having his players poached by Power 5 programs, which certainly has happened to Georgia State. It happened to us, as I documented on this show, before we went to the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. We went out there without our number one running back, our starting right tackle, and our number one wide receiver. His answer to that was he does not run from problems. He finds ways to solve them, which he did during his 7 years at Georgia State in many different areas and facets of our football program, being as young as it is, or it was when he got here, and as young as it is today. I do really think, and again, I was at the first spring practice a week and a half ago on a Tuesday, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, and I don't know if at that spring practice he knew he was going back to South Carolina. I think that ultimately what happened, it's the domino effect. Justin Stepp was on the staff at South Carolina, left to take a job at the University of Illinois. That opened a position on the South Carolina staff. And as Coach Elliott, I think, said in his press conference that I watched from that he held in Columbia, timing is everything. And again, I think maybe he felt he could accomplish or had reached a point where he accomplished what he wanted to accomplish as a head football coach, 7 years at Georgia State. Again, 5 bowl games in 7 seasons, winning 4 of those bowl games. The only one we lost was the Arizona Bowl. They won the Cure Bowl, the Lending Tree Bowl, the Camellia Bowl, the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. So he certainly elevated the Georgia State program well beyond where it was when he took over. I think the deciding factor, aside from the fact that, again, timing being what it was and a position coming open in Columbia, I think the opportunity to be back in Columbia with his wife and his 2 high school age children and his parents who live, I guess, near Columbia, I think that was above and beyond everything else, the driving factor in him deciding it was a good move to leave Georgia State and to head back to the University of South Carolina. If that job does not open on that staff, I think he's still the head football coach at Georgia State. And Georgia State, the last couple of years, has had one of the earliest spring practice sessions. Basically, we call it spring practice. We've started in February. It's really winter practice leading into spring practice in a spring game. Coach Elliott and his staff like to get it early, get it done early, and that way that you could use the back part of spring and early summer for conditioning and other things, other aspects of building the football program. But again, yes, timing was, from the outside looking in, a little peculiar if you didn't know the background story. But I think the opportunity to be back in Columbia at the University of South Carolina, but above and beyond that, back living with his family full time, I think that was really the deciding factor in the decision that he made. But he did great things at Georgia State. He left interestingly enough, I think he was 3 games under 500. I think his overall win-loss record at Georgia State was 41-44. But I think when you look back at it, he did great things at Georgia State. And when we talk about a program as young as this, helped to elevate it. And I think our athletic director said it best at the press conference on Monday. When you arrive somewhere, you hope to leave it better than you found it. And I think there's no question at all, Sean Elliott left Georgia State football a lot better than what it was when he arrived here 7.5 years ago.
Yeah, I agree to that.
100% agree to that as well. You're listening to Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers, right here on ATL Prime Sports. You can find Dave on X at GA State Voice. Dave, we all saw the article. I think it was Pete Thamel already talking about playoff expansion from 12 to 14. Probably a little bit better news for Georgia State football in terms of getting into the playoffs and inclusion. Your thoughts on the possible expansion to 14?
Isn't it funny how we talk about this? And what was it? Was it 3 years ago?
Yeah.
When we were on this podcast and I kept telling you guys about the treehouse effect.
Yeah.
That the Power Five built this really fancy treehouse, and
Yeah.
they pulled the ladder up because they didn't want anybody else to come and play in the treehouse, and everybody's standing at the bottom of the tree looking up. And I said we should go to a 12-team playoff. And people, didn't agree with me, or they maybe thought I was off my rocker when I said it. But the best way to emulate the NCAA tournament would be to have, now this is when you had 10 FBS leagues. You don't really have 10 anymore. 5 Power 5, 5 Group of 5. That you would have 10 playoff spots and 2 at-larges to get to 12 teams. Now, I said that meaning in a perfect world. You and I know that it was never going to happen that way. Number one, Power 5 college football was never going to let it happen. The SEC was never going to let it happen. And national television was never going to let it happen, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's a TV show. And they're going to go to 12. It wouldn't surprise me one iota if they go to 14. I think I read Group of 5 will get 1 at-large bid for the 5 Group of 5 leagues: American, Athletic, Sun Belt, MAC, Mountain West, Conference USA. That's 1 in how many chances of actually getting that 1 at-large representing Group of 5. You've also heard in recent weeks that the SEC and the Big Ten have gone off into the treehouse, and they're having meetings. And we have no idea what they're talking about the future of college football. Hypothetical. Do they break away and take a few teams from the Big 12 and the ACC with them, and do they start their own league, and then everybody else drops into what we'll call Group of 5, right now? Or, do we add another division? The Super Power 5, the remaining Power 5, the Group of 5, who knows? And you can't really not you guys, you can't really shake your head no, because we're already seeing things across the college football landscape that a year ago or 2 years ago we didn't think we'd see.
I didn't think it was possible.
Well, you know what that meeting could have been about They could have been about discussing whether it's going to be continuing on with Dr. Pepper as the official drink or whether they're going to go with this new Starry thing that I keep seeing everywhere.
It could have been about whether or not to do a contract deal with ATL Prime Sports to become the official podcast of Power 5 football.
Now, I'm
Jeez,
for that, Dave. I'll tell you, I'm for that 100%, number one. Number two, you mentioned about the Big Ten and the SEC breaking off. I've heard a lot of rumors about that where they're going to take the top 60 teams, divide the money up amongst them, and have a 12 playoff. Eventually, that could very well happen. It just could be big boy football, and everybody else is left out. You can see the playoff will definitely be dominated this year by the Big Ten, by the SEC. You'll get a sprinkle of a Big 12, a dot of an ACC. There is no Pac-12. I know Oregon State and Washington State are going to play a Mountain West schedule, and I'm taking a nap. But and maybe we'll get a group of 5 in there. You'll get one team. But I don't think, even if they go to 16, you'll ever see the group of 5 get one more team, or they're just going to break off altogether, and it's just going to be big boy, semi-pro, money-dominated football.
Well, I think the example they're using, and the door cracked open, wasn't it Liberty this year that got their doors blown off in the playoff game they were in?
Correct.
And so all
Yes.
that does is it reinforces to the Power 5 that they really don't need a group of 5 program in there. Could Appalachian State have given them a better game? Could James Madison have given a better game? I don't know. I mean, you don't know until you play the game. That's what makes the NCAA basketball tournament such a great event. The whole event is a great event, but when you drill down, the best part to me of the NCAA tournament is those first 2-3 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you get games on neutral floors in neutral cities between Power 5s and what we'll call Group of 5s, lower level Division I programs, and that's when the fun begins.
Yeah.
When you see upsets and the Cinderellas, raise their hand and say, look at me, look what I can do. I'm taking down Power 5 school X or whatever. That's the fun of the tournament, in my opinion. Now, the Final Four is great. Don't get me wrong. We all know we're watching good basketball. But above and beyond that, it's the first 2-3 days of the
Absolutely.
NCAA tournament that makes it, to me, one of the great sporting events that we get each and every year.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. I mean, go ahead, Wayne.
Speaking of tournaments, Dave, it looks like Memphis and Georgia State find themselves in a similar position, having to win it to get in it.
Oh, no question. I mean, right now, and we've got James Madison and Marshall in Atlanta this week at the Georgia State Convocation Center, our final 2 regular season games before we head down to Pensacola. Right now, we're coming off a tough loss to Texas State on Saturday, but right now we're 15-13 and 2 games under 500 overall, 2 games under 500 in Sun Belt play. The James Madison game is going to be a tough one. They've got the best overall record in the Sun Belt, although they're in second place right behind Appalachian State. They're 26-3 and 13-3. And then we've got Marshall on Saturday. The only way Georgia State is going to find themselves talking about an NCAA tournament bid is they're going to have to win the Sun Belt Conference tournament.
Yeah.
And it's now being a 14-team league. You got to win, 4 or 5 games in order to do that, and that's just really, really tough to do. And you're talking about the Sun Belt being a 1-bid league. So you got 14 schools chasing 1 bid, and that's tough.
Yeah, well, the American Conference is probably going to get one in at large, but the other one's going to have to be whoever wins the tournament. And if that at large team wins the tournament, then it'll just be a one team league going into that tournament.
Yeah, and mighty how times have changed in the American with the loss of Houston, Cincinnati, and the University of Central Florida. As you mentioned earlier in the show, you're about to lose the Dallas market when Rob Lanier and SMU jumped to the ACC. I don't know we have a perception of the American Athletic Conference, but that perception is based on prior to those schools leaving.
Yeah.
And so the American although it still has some pretty good schools in that league, it's not what it was with those three and then those four. I'm including SMU in that, even though they're still in it. It's definitely going to drop a few notches and find itself in a similar situation that the Sun Belt is. Again, everybody chasing one bid.
Yep.
Dave, you know what? You and I have texted privately, and I just wanted to say, my condolences to you. I know that you really liked Lefty, and you were pretty close to him. You got to know him when he was at Georgia State, and he just passed away not long ago. We talked to Ben more about it last week, and take the floor and tell us what he meant to you and what he meant to Georgia State.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I did. I kept in touch with him. I talked to him on Christmas Day. He was a Christmas baby. My dad was born on Christmas Day. So it's kind of become my little tradition of 30 minutes on Christmas Day that I'll sit down and I would call my dad for about 15, 20 minutes. And when we would hang up, I would turn around and I would call Lefty and we would talk for 10 or 15 minutes. And just, hello, happy birthday, catch up. He always kept up with Georgia State basketball. I was not the only one from Georgia State in his days here that kept in pretty good touch with him. But he was up in Virginia Beach. I'm so thankful that last year when Georgia State made the Old Dominion trip, which is in Norfolk, Virginia, which is where Lefty was born, and that was his hometown, but he lived in Virginia Beach, that I drove over to Virginia Beach with a fellow Georgia State friend of mine, and we spent the afternoon in Lefty's condo with him for, about 3 or 4 hours, and just sitting at his kitchen table, looking out at the ocean, talking, rehashing Georgia State basketball, rehashing college basketball. He was great. We recorded one of our Panther Insider podcasts, which, we put out. I recorded a radio interview with him, about 5-6 minutes, that I ran that night during our radio broadcast for Georgia State and Old Dominion. He really was. Somebody said something, I can't remember if it was Ben or somebody posted on the 247 site. You could almost make the argument, because one of the things that Lefty did upon his arrival at Georgia State, and for those that don't know, I've been there since 1982 when it was a really, really small athletic department. When Lefty arrived in 1996-97, in his way, he really forced Georgia State athletics, not just basketball, but Georgia State athletics, to grow beyond the boundaries that it had become comfortable operating in as a Trans-America Athletic Conference and then later Atlantic Sun program. Again, at that time, no football, playing in the Georgia State Sports Arena, which I know you guys have been to before.
Yes.
Lefty really forced the program, and sometimes the program would be kicking and screaming, but he forced it to grow beyond its comfortable boundaries. And, folks told me many times, coaches, Georgia State, toughest job in the country. No one will ever win there. Well, Lefty came in after 9 seasons at James Madison. In 5 seasons in 10 games, never had a losing season. He won 16 games his first year, 17 his second, 17 his third, 29 against only 5 losses, a win over Georgia in Athens that year.
Yeah.
And then later on, a win over Wisconsin in the NCAA tournament for the first NCAA tournament win in program history. Followed it up season 5 with a 20-win season, a loss to Florida Atlantic in the conference championship game and an NIT bid. And then he retired 10 games into season number 6. One interesting note, Lefty won 786 games. I did used to tell him that he should have stuck around till he got that 800th win. He was, 14 wins away. If he had stayed the rest of the season, he would have gotten that 800th win definitely by at least mid-season the next year. But his 786th win was at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and he was not even there. He was in Atlanta, wasn't feeling well, didn't make the trip. Assistant coach Mike Perry was the interim coach, the acting coach that night. We won that game, and so that was technically his 786th win. And again, not only was he not there, he wasn't even in the state of South Carolina. He was in Atlanta.
Interesting.
And let me just say, the other thing that I'm so thankful for on two ends. Number one, that I was, provided the opportunity to go with the Georgia State party, and that was to go the night before we played in football at NC State. A group of us traveled to Springfield, Massachusetts for the induction ceremony for the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. A lot of people attend that. A lot of people are familiar with it. I had been there before once as a kid growing up in the Boston area, but never in your wildest dream do you think you'll go to that ceremony where you actually know one of the inductees personally, and someone that you can call a friend of yours. And so to be there that night with Lefty, with his family, his children, his grandchildren, again, with him, the night he gets inducted, he's in every Hall of Fame that he ever coached at. He's in other Halls of Fame in Virginia, in Norfolk. That's the granddaddy of them all. Obviously, it was the only one he was not in. I'm so thankful he got in while he was still with us, healthy enough and with all of his faculties that he could make it and be there in person. I would suggest to you guys, if you've never gone on YouTube and watched it, his acceptance speech still is one of the best acceptance speeches in the history of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. So again, I'm thankful that I got to know him. I'm thankful that for everything that he did at Georgia State. It was a great ride. And again, he did great things at Georgia State considering the time period with which he was there. Some would say we may not have football today if Lefty Driesell never comes to Georgia State, which you could sit back. That's a topic for another show. You could sit and debate that with what he did, what he accomplished, and again, how he forced the department to grow. You could throw out the rhetorical question: would we have football at the level that we have it today if he had not done what he did in his time in athletics at Georgia State? So again, just thankful that he came into my life, that I stayed in touch with him, and that he got into the Naismith Hall of Fame. And I'll leave you with this. The last thing about Lefty: if at birth somebody said to each of you, you're going to live to 92, most of it healthy, and you're going to experience what Lefty experienced throughout his life, both family and in the coaching profession, and accomplish what he accomplished, we'd all say, give me the pen, I'll sign right now, right here. And so while it's sad, we also celebrate Lefty. We celebrate his life, and we celebrate his friendship, and we celebrate, obviously, his accomplishments.
Dave, so well said. My thoughts and prayers are with you and your loss. And I know he was really special to you. And you know what? You come on next time. I'll let you debate that and talk about that subject, because everything you said today I find really fascinating. And then when you said without Lefty, would there be college football at Georgia State? That is a great topic and a really excellent statement you made, and it has a lot of merit. And I just want to say thanks for putting everything you said so professional and so profound. I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, our thoughts and prayers are with you as well, Dave, and all of the Georgia State family and Coach Lefty's family as well. We'll get you out of here with the normal. How do our listeners catch tomorrow night's tip-off versus James Madison? Excuse me if I can talk.
That's okay. So, yeah, we got James Madison here Wednesday night, Marshall in here on Saturday night. We're on ESPN Plus. And we are also on our 50,000-watt FM station, WRAS, at 88.5 on the dial in Atlanta. You can also listen via the GSU Athletics mobile app and online at lowcountryradio.com. I think I've told you guys for home games, We simulcast. We're on ESPN Plus, and we're also on the radio. And then road games, obviously, we are radio only. So we'll be back to being radio only when we get down to Pensacola. But looking forward to this one. This is a James Madison team that beat us by 20 a couple of weeks ago in Harrisonburg. It's a Marshall team that we lost to in Huntington. We get both here in Atlanta. It's an opportunity to close the regular season with an exclamation point. And so we'll see what we do.
Absolutely. Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers, football, basketball, and baseball. Thanks for joining us, Dave. We'll see you soon.
All right, you guys take it easy. Look forward to joining you again soon.
Absolutely. We'll move on with our show. We'll talk a little Major League Baseball. Spring training games are underway for all 30 Major League Baseball teams, meaning players can make their team's opening day roster with the great spring. Who is that dark horse player for the Atlanta Braves? Todd and I will go through a couple, and Wayne, I got a dark horse player that might make your Texas Rangers World Series champion squad. We'll see about that. But I'll start this thing off. I think there's two that are really going to compete for that last spot. I'd love to see Charlie Culberson make it as a dark horse, but I think that's kind of more of a long shot, seeing how the Braves bullpen is extremely well positioned, from long reliever all the way to the closing position with Rossell Iglesias. But I'll start off with Forrest Wall. Had 5 steals last season in 13 games. Also had a stolen base in the postseason. Had 6 hits in those 13 games. And then Jordan Luplow, a 7-year MLB veteran, played for several teams along the way. Another right-handed bat. Another option versus lefties when Jared Kelenich's maybe getting a day off here or two versus a lefty. So those are my 2 dark horses that could make the opening day Atlanta Braves roster. TC, what say you about a dark horse Atlanta Braves?
I don't even know if this is a dark horse. This is just a great story. Charlie Culberson, as everyone knows, that follows Major League Baseball, as a Braves fan, he's been a really good infielder, spot starter, utility player, moves all around, and now he's trying to make the team as a relief pitcher. He has quite an arm. We'll see if he does it, but if he does, what a story for the guy who's from Rome, Georgia, up the road from here. And that, to me, would be a fantastic story coming out of Braves camp, because let's face it, this team, the roster is pretty much set. It's loaded. It has a chance to not only win the East, but maybe get out of the National League. They're going to have to get over the Phillies hump. But the rosters are all set, and you only have a couple of guys here and there, because this is a loaded group, and we'll see how this works out.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Fun spring training. Lots, just like you said, Todd, this is a completely stacked roster according to MLB.com. The number 1 roster in baseball, over the Dodgers and a couple other American League teams there. So this roster set's going to be interesting, how they go into the regular season, opening up against those Philadelphia Phillies in Philadelphia. It's going to be fun. But Wayne, speaking of your Rangers, man, former Brave has made the non-roster invites. Shane Green is my dark horse to make the opening day roster for the Texas Rangers. Is there any other dark horse you're looking forward to maybe seeing in a Texas Rangers uniform, Wayne?
Well, I haven't even started thinking about baseball yet. I've got so much other things going on, so I hadn't had time to look at possible rosters or even what the schedule might look like. So you may have to catch me, I would say sometime in April, to see what my interest in baseball is, because that's probably when I'll start looking at it.
Fair enough.
If I may say, Wayne, because really, with a 162-game season, a lot of folks don't start paying attention to the standings until about mid-June. I find that very interesting, because you'll have the Stanley Cup playoffs coming in, and that was well said.
Let's move on, continue the show. We'll move over to a little NFL, and The Atlanta Falcons, on my chest, on my hat, have a dire need at the quarterback position. That is not news. But what is news is how many quarterbacks will have new teams next fall. And I think it'll be about 4 or 5, maybe a couple we don't expect. So let's talk about some of those teams that might get new quarterbacks. Todd, I'm interested to hear your take on this. This is stemming from a Sporting News article that's kind of predicting all 32 starting quarterbacks next year. Obviously, half the league's pretty much set with your Josh Allens, your Patrick Mahomes, and yada, 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 all the way down, Joe Burrows, and so on and so forth. But I'm interested to hear your take on this, Todd. Start with the Falcons and then move around with a couple teams that you think will have a new starting quarterback.
Well, here's the situation. Everybody's focused on the Falcons quarterback, and that's good. But, this team has several needs besides quarterback. Wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback, defensive tackle. They can use a linebacker. They can even use an offensive lineman. But I mean, the quarterback is the one that everybody's fixated on. It's the elephant in the room. And there are many possibilities for Atlanta. And if somebody can predict it, they need to go to Vegas and start playing, because you predict this, you can definitely have a shot to win money in Vegas. One, they're talking about trading for Justin Fields. Two, Kirk Cousins. Three, trade up and draft a quarterback, whoever they may be. Four, trade down, maybe draft J.J. McCarthy from Michigan, or take him at 8. Draft Bo Nix. And on, Penix, and et cetera. There were a couple of stories today. Sean Payton said 2 weeks on Russell Wilson. They should have an answer. And also, the Bears have not made up their mind what they're going to do with Justin Fields. Now, if they decide that they're going to draft a quarterback, then they said they would like to trade Justin Fields before the draft. So, in other words, pour a glass of champagne and sit and wait by the fireplace, because if anybody knows anything about this stuff and has a crystal ball, I would like to know. But as John U. Bacon would say, nobody knows nothing.
Yeah, if you had to pick one, Todd, who would it be? What would be if you're the GM?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. My guess, and this is only a guess,
that's all we're doing
is coming in here.
Yeah.
That's my guess. A veteran is coming in here. If not, me personally, I'd like to see him draft J.J. McCarthy. He's only 21, and I've talked about that potential on other shows before. So my guess is they're going to try to get a veteran, but anything and everything is wide open, as Terry Fontenot said. And, of course, Raheem Morris said, the elephant in the room.
And so way to dodge the question, not giving an answer there. I'll go out on a limb. I think it's going to be one of two guys, and I'll put them both out there. I think it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. I do think Raheem Morris is going to bring in a free agent quarterback. I don't think at 8, unless you move up, I don't think you're getting one of the top 3 or 4 guys that you want. And if you move down and get J.J. McCarthy, I'm not too high or low on that. I'm kind of indifferent. But if you ask me, to answer the question for our listeners, it's Justin Fields. That's my number 1, and number 2 would be Russell Wilson. Because if Russell Wilson is released from Denver, you have a Super Bowl champion that can step in, finish his career in Atlanta with not a lot of expectations, but a lot of football left to play. The guy threw for over 3,000 yards last year, took care of the football, threw for over 25 touchdowns. He can still play. Justin Fields, the turnover issues are there, but he ran for around 600 yards last year, or 500 yards, whatever it is, has a couple scores. Only 9 interceptions for Justin Fields last year. I think 16 touchdown passes, around 2,500 yards. So he's got a lot of upside with his legs. And you'd love to see Bijan Robinson and Justin Fields in the background, in the backfield. And, of course, the hometown kid coming home. played for Georgia for a season. So those are my two, A and B, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. And honestly, you go around the league here, I do think the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams. I think a lot of GMs, a lot of owners around the league think highly of Caleb Williams and his ability and what he did with Lincoln Riley out there in Southern California. So I think the Bears will go with Caleb Williams. And you go around the league elsewhere, I personally think if Russell Wilson's getting cut, I think at 12, you may see J.J. McCarthy go to Denver. So there's a quarterback carousel that's definitely in motion, and it will start in April when the number one overall pick is put in. And if it is Caleb Williams and Justin Fields has been traded, there'll be a lot more clarity here. But to answer the question for me, I think it's Justin Fields A and Russell Wilson B. Wayne, what say you?
Well, I've been an Atlanta Falcons fan for a long time, and so I kind of know how they think up in the front office. And this is what I think is going to happen. You're going to have they're going to somehow get Russell Wilson to be their starting quarterback, and after about I don't know, part of the way through the season, he's going to start getting injuries. And then they're going to say, hey, we need to draft Bo Nix. And Bo Nix is going to come in, and he's going to be kind of a flop, and they're going to be right back where they are right now.
Typical Falcons.
Yep.
Typical Falcons. Todd, I mentioned some other quarterbacks around the league. You're really high on J.J. McCarthy. Do you think the chances of Atlanta drafting J.J. McCarthy are high in your opinion? And I don't think he's a bad player at all. He's got a high pedigree, just coming off a national championship, well coached under Jim Harbaugh. So if you're the GM, are you drafting J.J. McCarthy at 8?
Well, the ideal thing would be to trade down and get an extra pick, because I mentioned the team has several needs. And if you can do that and McCarthy's there at 12 and you can trade down and get an extra second or third round pick or a late first round pick or early second round pick, whatever it is, I have zero problem with that. I did answer the question earlier.
I'm just teasing with you.
My guess is they're going to get a veteran. I do not want it to be Justin Fields. I am the opposite with you. But look, I'm not into this homer. We got to get the home guy, get the best guy for the job, whoever that is. And this thing is so wide open. Again, if somebody has all the answers, go to Vegas and start playing, because I have no clue what the Atlanta Falcons are doing. It's all guesswork. Fields could go to Pittsburgh. Cousins could re-sign. We could go through scenarios for 30 minutes.
You really could. And then that's why I wanted to say, I just want to get an answer because it's a fun discussion. There's really, honestly, we discussed this off there. There's 6 to 10 options that are fairly viable. Jake Browning played some pretty good ball in Joe Burrow's absence. Did the Falcons get on the phone with the Cincinnati GM and say, hey, what does it take to get Browning down here?
Yeah, it would take more to think, because Joe Burrow seems to get hurt, and he did a really good job. And in this league, if you can get a backup quarterback at a relatively good price and you got a nice veteran that can do a job for you, teams aren't really, really keen on letting that individual go.
No, I agree 100%. I'm just saying it is a viable option if that's what they decide to try and acquire. There's just so many. There's a lot of quarterbacks out there that could possibly be looming free agents. There's rumors Jimmy Garoppolo may be cut in, I keep wanting to say Oakland, in Las Vegas. So there's plenty of options out there. But Todd and I are both in agreement. I think the Falcons will bring in a free agent. We're on difference on who, but I'd love to see Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, not because of the hometown thing, simply because the guy has a ton of upside and the ability to run the football with his legs is elite. And I think you have that type of read option ability with Bijan Robinson and Justin Fields in the backfield. That gives new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson a lot more play. Wayne, any final thoughts on the Falcons quarterback situation moving into the fall, or any other quarterback situation around the league that you're interested in?
Well, I'd be interested to find out what are the chances of that kid from Michigan ending up in a Chargers uniform.
Ooh.
You know what? There's been talk about that he might draft him, but I don't see it because the Chargers have too many needs. They're up against the cap. They would have to trade Justin Herbert, and that's not going to happen. And,
Agreed.
go back to the Falcons QB situation real quick. Nobody has mentioned Desmond Ridder. I think he's on this team next year. And, if they don't bring in a veteran, if they don't do it, he's right back where he started, fighting for the starting job.
100% agreed. There's plenty of options for Atlanta. And who knows, maybe Desmond Ridder develops into that player that Arthur Smith in the previous regimen thought he could be. Well, folks, that wraps up our topics for today. We'll get into our final thought, and I'll kick off this final thought. It involves court storming / field storming. I'm putting it all under one umbrella. I'm very much on the fence about this. Todd and I had a conversation about this off air because I do like to see the underdogs win, and a field or a court stormed or rushed, whichever word you want to use, is a very cool sight for television and when you're in the stands. But I also agree that it's gotten out of hand. We have seen incidents on the football field with Jermaine Burton versus a young lady, Tennessee student in the Tennessee-Alabama upset a couple years ago. Seen Caitlin Clark, and now most recently the incident involving Duke power forward Flipikowski, I believe. And again, if I'm mispronouncing, I do apologize. But if you ask me, what is the reason behind this? I don't know if it's alcohol sales, which has been mentioned on another podcast with Luke Gamlin we had here. If it's a lack of security or just bad planning by the university. But look, if this isn't going away, coaches are going to have to start prepping players on this, getting their players out before the game. If the game's decided, if you're down 15 points and you're going to get upset, maybe get all the players out except for 5 walk-ons and have a plan for them to get out as quick as possible. I have no clue what you do here. I'm completely on the fence about this. If it goes away, I'm okay with it. If court storming stays, I'm okay with it. But I do know whatever happens, I want the interest of both fans and players' safety at hand the most. And I don't know how you solve this problem. Everybody says more security this, more security that. I don't know where it ends. And we could discuss this for minutes upon minutes upon minutes. And I know we don't have time. We're at the end of the show. But, folks, leave a comment in the YouTube section, the Spotify section. Tell us what you think. Should court storming and field storming be outlawed? Wayne, your final thought for the evening, and we'll go to Todd.
I'll go ahead and talk about this court storming thing. At the FedEx Forum, it's almost nearly impossible to storm the court because of how they have the chairs and everything lined up and the tables. And on the end lines, they pretty much block that off with some rope, and they get a lot of security. Plus, at the end of the game at Memphis, the whole court's flooded up with pom-pom squad, ambush squad, teams still out there making their way to the locker room. And most of the people that are in the FedEx Forum, they're ready to get out on Beale Street, so they got no interest in storming the court. If I wanted to storm the court, I'd have to tie together 2 or 3 jackets to get out of that terrace level and make my way down there. And by then, it'd all be over with.
Interesting point. Memphis plays in an NBA arena.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Probably does.
It's very interesting. Todd, final thought. You're gonna take it away for us on the final thoughts.
Look, when you tell your children as a parent, you have consequences for your behavior. If these students come onto this floor, then they have consequences for their behavior. It should be outlawed without a doubt. It's ridiculous. They need to have consequences, and the consequences are, and they need to make this in stone, in writing, so everyone knows, A, the university will be fined a lot more money than they're being fined now, and B, these people are written a citation, and C, they're arrested, and D, they go to jail. Consequences for your behavior. You got to get it written. You got to get it done, and you need to get it done now because somebody's going to get killed. And the sad thing is they'll probably wait until it's too late because that's what we do as a society.
Yeah, unfortunately, we all make good points on it, and it is a issue at the top of the discussion board on a lot of sports podcasts right now. Folks, that wraps it up. If you like the content, give us a like, a subscribe, hit that notification button so you know when we're dropping our latest video. For Wayne in Memphis, TC in Woodstock, myself, JJ in Lilburn, Georgia, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Get you one. And I want to sign off. Prayers for the victim in UGA, the young lady who was killed recently. Prayers to the whole entire student body at UGA as you're all going through a tough time. That wraps us up. We'll see you next week.